Awesome. Hello, everybody. Welcome back into another session here. Today we have the opportunity to spend some time with our friends here from Aruba, and included with Aruba is going to be Devin Miller from Seattle Public Schools and Mark Earhart from Arlington Public Schools. The focus really on this one is they're going to go through the user experience, and they're going to talk about how they are using the tools. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Bonnie, and I'm going to pin Bonnie to the main stage here.
Cool. Thank you very much. And let me share my screen and get that going. Morning, everybody. I hope the sessions are going well for everybody. Let me get to full screen. I'm Bonnie Filer with Aruba. I came from the Cape Networks acquisition about 3 years ago now. And so we're going to talk a little bit about user experience insight and how it's going to help you get ready for the future and make sure that your network is adapting to anything that you get thrown your way. The gist of it is everyone's living in this world today in that, the complaints come in randomly. Maybe last week I wasn't able to attach to Zoom for a whole day, or, I'm in the cafeteria. The people that are bringing in bad experiences that they had aren't necessarily able to tell you why they had the bad experience, what they were doing, what network they were on. All they know is that I tried to do something and I couldn't do it, which doesn't give you, a lot of tools to start to do the troubleshooting. Where do just saying Zoom didn't work doesn't tell you anything. Added with the fact that there's a bunch of devices that are coming on the network. Maybe it's new Chromebooks, maybe it's a BYOD, just anything changes. So how do we resolve this situation? How do we get ahead of the game and know what the network's doing and know what the experience is going to be? And Aruba says, put these sensors out there. It's a very simple story. It's a sensor solution that you put in the network, just like think of this sensor as another client testing your network. Its day job is to onboard and test the network all day, sending the metrics back to a dashboard, giving you the ability to baseline and trend and know what's coming and know if that new service that we rolled out actually worked. Did it make the experience for people better or worse? Or when I did that upgrade to the server, what exactly happened from the perspective of the user? The way it flows is there's your user. You can think of that as replacing it with a sensor. The sensor onboards just like a user. It logs in through a captive portal. It does all of the normal onboarding DHCP, DNS authentication process that a normal user would do. And then the sensor continues to test. It will test internal tests. Maybe these are servers, iPerf servers, or services that are required to run the applications that are being used externally. All of this is sent back to a dashboard, which is intentionally very simple to read and understand. And along with it has the triage that you may need to use, to go and actually troubleshoot things. These are the sensors. Some people, if you have any, historically we've been sending out these sensors here that are the square looking, sort of like an access point, but we've recently released these tower looking sensors, which actually have now been deemed as look like hand sanitizer stations. And this is the back end dashboard that people are using. The sensor itself is a Linux-based client. So this is not meant to be an access point or the most powerful person in the room. It's your average client meant to mimic a laptop or phone or typical device that somebody's using. There's cellular built into the sensor, so you don't have to pull cables to run these sensors. You can use the cellular, it'll onboard the network, call home, get its configuration, and start testing within 5 minutes. It provides packet captures and back-in-time data, so you can go back as far as 30 days. So when somebody complains last week that things weren't working, you can go back and look and see what exactly was happening last week. There's also backup power. So if the sensor were to go offline for some reason, it would tell you why it went offline and what, was it a network thing or was it a sensor power thing itself? The sensor does wireless testing and Ethernet testing in conjunction. So I could, compare things on the wireless and on the Ethernet, see what the outcomes were on both platforms. It also does application testing, and not just from a reachability or availability of that application, but we can log into the application and log back out of it and measure all of those transactions along the way. And the goal is to give you a quicker time to resolution. I'm going to develop a baseline and a benchmark, and I know when I deviate from that, and I know, okay, I can completely correlate that to a server upgrade or something that happened at that same time. It is your remote technician. The day job is for this sensor to just sit there and test all day long, which saves the truck roll, which saves, gives you the visibility of back in time. Validation, before and after we test, and it's all wrapped around user experience. When things go well, this is what the dashboard looks like. When they're not so good, this is where you get the red alerts. And that's followed by detailed triage, step by step, how was the sensor connected? What was the signal levels? All of the details that nobody can ever tell you. And then it takes you step by step. Did I authenticate? What was the lease information? Where it gives you a curl file, whatever the details are needed for that particular application that failed. And we first run that on the Wi-Fi, and then we will run it on the Ethernet. So you can say, here's what the experience was when they ran that application on the wireless, and here's what the experience was when they ran it on the Ethernet. Now, did it fail on both or just on one platform? It starts to give you that target direction of where to go to troubleshoot the situation, and get to the root cause quickly. So I'm going ahead, I got, just one summary to summarize what I'm kind of blowing through quickly is it's simple to deploy, proactive, and vendor agnostic. This is not an Aruba, you have to have an Aruba network solution. This is a client. I don't care what the network is. It's independently looking at the network. So let me go to the demo to show you guys what that looks like. Any questions? Anything before when I went full screen, I lost doesn't look like there's any questions on here. And so I will dive into the demo. This is the dashboard. You can, most people use this dashboard at some levels. A lot of people also will, try to incorporate this into their workflow. So they've exported it to a ServiceNow or some sort of notification system that they're using, and in that way that the knock tickets and all of that are trackable and usable that way. You're looking at the last 24 hours of everything that's been going on for these offices down here. And these could be buildings or floors. You design this how you want it. These are the networks that we're logging into. If there was a captive portal being used, it would be listed down here. We would be logging into that captive portal, logging back out, and measuring the load times and redirect times of that captive portal. These are internal tests. You could think of these as the services that are required to run these applications. In this instance, we've got some iPerf to show some load and throughput capacity. Maybe instead of putting a bunch of devices out in a classroom running YouTube all day, you could just put the sensor in the classroom and you would already know, what were the load times of that. And something just to note here is we do have support and chat down here in the bottom of the site here. So you can at any time get a hold of somebody and ask a question or look up a document and see, how to do something. Just to show you a little bit about how we do the setup of everything. If I look to one of these offices, and let's just try to find, say somebody in the CTO's office was complaining, and it looks like Rack 5 had some issues going on. this is the status page of one of the sensors. By default, I'm looking at the last 24 hours, but in this case, I had logged into this one earlier. And so now I've gone back to 7 days to see what's been happening for those 7 days. This particular sensor is testing 2 SSIDs and 1 Ethernet network. Each sensor has the ability to test 4 networks total. And I can see as I scroll over here for the past 7 days, things have been relatively okay on this employee SSID, but it looks like there's been some issues happening on the HPN network. And I can, as I scroll, it'll timestamp. I'll zoom in a little bit. It'll timestamp and tell you, you know, what issue was happening at what time. Also, if I locked into something, I could go over here and look and see what was happening at that same time that I was having a DNS issue or a timeout. You know, was there a band change, or was there a spike in some sort of service? I could also look at, you know, these are my internal tests, and this is, you know, all of the tests, that the results, packet loss across tests. So I could start to compare how things are doing for each of the tests, and see if just one service was having an issue, or you know, was it across all the services. Additionally, if I wanted to get to the triage, I could, if I just pick one of these, it looks like I had a timeout. You can look at the URL. So this is a sample of some triage. I could see it was the resolution of the logging in didn't work. This is this is how that sensor was connected at the time. That shows you, you know, all of the detail that that person who would normally be complaining about this doesn't know and can't tell you, unless you wanted to bring up a remote session. If it was happening right then and there, you could get onto their laptop. And then it goes step by step, and it timestamps each step along the way. It would show you all the DNS and the lease information. And then it will also go back and now compare it onto the Ethernet as well and give you the results of that. All of this would be exported as a text file, or you could copy and paste this to an application team, you know, whatever you need to do. So it's the simple dashboard combined with the details that the teams need to actually get the job done and fix whatever's happening from an issue perspective. The way we set these tests up is, this is the settings page. And you can see we've got the different networks and everything. But in here, I wanted to show you how we add tests to this. And it's right, these are the tests that are configured. This is a demo site, so it's a little different than your normal customer site would be. But the tests are internal, external, predefined, where we've got, you know, some profiles set up, and then custom. This is where I can, you know, do a generic ping test to a service. I can run throughput tests. Telnet is for scanners. If I have my own voice server, I can set that up. And then I can also do the web application testing. And I wanted to just show you quickly how, let me get back to the dashboard and get out of full screen mode. If I want the sensor to actually log into some sort of website, let's say, I could just go here and launch, record a new project. Let's call this project, I don't know, we'll call it target.com. I should have thought of a website or target test website ahead of time. And now let's say it's going to log into, I'm going to be having everybody log into Target for some reason, and I'm going to record. So now the sensor is going to go to target.com. What's new? You know, this could be your school's website. This could be an application, you know, kids' new arrivals. And you can see here in the background that the sensor's recording each step that I'm making, and it's also time stamping. You'll see at the bottom. Let's assume that this, let's say I you know, don't want to change my mind. I could do anything. I could log out, log into something, and then I'm going to say stop recording, call it something, target. And now this script, the sensor will run each time it's, you know, you've set it up to run either hourly or daily or whatever you've said. I can test this script to see if it works. And now you can see This is the script, and yet down here, it's actually time stamping each one of the steps along the way, and it's saying it made it. So now I can save this as a file. Let's do it to desktop. And it's a .side file. So now if I go back to my dashboard, get the full screen. Go back to the settings page, test, add test. I'm going to add that web server or web application test, and I can choose my file. I'm going to select that side file, and now it will give me the option to how often do I want to run this test. Maybe it's every 2 hours, 4 hours, whatever I want to have, and then I would add it to the account. So I would eventually see it pop up here, and it will run that test. Now, just within the cycle, you know, the sensor's grabbing that IP address, going through each one of these tests one after another, and when it gets to that, if it's in the time scope, it'll run that test, and then it releases the IP address and goes back and does it again. That's pretty much the solution. It's very simple, you know, gives you the business visibility you need to know what's happening, how often it's happening, and what do I need to fix, you know, after a whole year of looking at, you know, what were my errors? Were they basically around servers, or was it the applications, or was it usage that was the error? So that is all I had. If there's any questions, don't see any. So I guess I will stop sharing and hand the ball over to Devin.
Great, let me share my screen. All right, my name's Devin. I'm the Senior Network Engineer for Seattle Public Schools. So a little over a year ago, we began to see an increased importance in wireless as we started rolling out a one-to-one program for high schools at the district. And then, in addition to that, we were seeing some issues that were impacting some standardized testing in the district as well. So we were looking for some solutions that would provide us with some additional visibility from the client perspective for wireless clients in particular. Ultimately, we explored a couple different solutions, and the Aruba UXI solution was incredibly stable and mature. And we proceeded to invest in that. So initially, we focused on a small deployment. You know, it was only 10 sensors, and we put those out in a handful of schools that we have traditionally considered test schools. So if we're testing changes, we will test at these schools first before we make a wider deployment change. And then, in addition to that, we also broke those schools up across multiple wireless controllers, so we could identify issues based on wireless controller and things like that with our current wireless LAN. You know, we had a lot of success with that. Very early on, we did experience the issue that we were seeing that was impacting school testing, and we were able to identify root cause based on that. There were some authentication problems on a particular wireless controller. That we were able to then collect a lot of this data and then send it back to Cisco for some further analysis, and that helped resolve those underlying issues as a result of these sensors being in schools. There's no bias here. They're just sitting out there constantly collecting data, and that was really helpful to us. So fast forward to now, we've gone ahead and we are currently in the process of expanding the deployment. We've got about 105 or so sites. So what we're doing is we're in the process of deploying sensors, one sensor at every single site. We're going to pick a given classroom in each school as a way to represent the district. One of the key things that we're doing with that deployment is that that classroom, we're going to make sure it goes back to the MDF, to the primary core switch at each school, and that way we can detect issues directly related to that primary switch, including PoE power problems. One of the things that we really liked about the solution was the fact that it provides we invested in the ones that are LTE based, so they have an LTE backhaul in case there's any issues with our main infrastructure across the district. In addition to that, as Bonnie mentioned, there's a backup power solution. So I believe it's a high capacity capacitor, a supercharged capacitor. So you get kind of a last gasp of breath. If power goes out, it'll call home and say the power has been removed from a sensor, which is very helpful because power continues to be a major issue across the district for various reasons. So we're breaking these down we break a lot of our stuff down into clusters between south, central, and north. And then we also, in addition to that, we've got some VPN sites that we're delivering these sensors to. And then what we're also doing, so the new installation that we're doing now with one at every school is using, I think it's the G series, that newer series that looks like a hand sanitizer station. That is going into every school, and then we're taking the older models that we'd already purchased, the 10, and we're going to pull those back, and we're calling those a Go Kit set, so that our field technicians, if there was an ongoing issue that we couldn't nail down as something that was systemic for the entire school, if there was something potentially going on in one given area of the school, we're going to have these Go Kits that we can deploy and set up in a given room or a set of rooms to get more visibility into what's going on in a given area that may not be able to get picked up by the primary sensor in each school. So that's kind of the way we're deploying it now. Some of the things we really enjoy about this are the even the basic things like the dial tone services like DHCP, DNS, being able to have a really quick, very basic dashboard that we can provide to other members of the organization as a means to say, well, can you go check this first? If your school is having issues, go check here first. If you see that this is good, then it's not the whole school, it's something more isolated. So as a result of this dashboard being so simplistic, we're going to deploy this out. We're going to make this available to all of our field technicians across the district, and we're about to make it available to our help desk so they can begin to use this now that we're going to deploy this in every single school. Most of the tests that we're doing are just basic web checks at this time. So they're just checking to make sure a port is valid and then also making sure that the certificate is valid. We try to focus heavily on the kinds of services that are being used directly in the classroom, which are mostly SaaS-based at this point. So lots of different little services, Amplify, Clever, other things, smaller things like Desmos and Nearpod, and then up to things like Schoology and Seesaw and PowerSchool, etc. So that's where we focused. One of the things that you might experience with this solution is that you want to kind of balance. You might have the notion to go a little crazy on the stuff you could potentially test, but that increases that interval between each network that you're testing. So if you kind of have to strike this balance between the number of tests you're actually testing and then the number of networks you're testing across. So we're testing in any one sensor, we're testing 4 different networks. We've got a primary production network that we test on for wireless that all district devices authenticate to. We've got a district guest network for staff and students called SPS username. And then we have just a walking off the street guest network as well that uses a captive portal. We're still exploring use of the captive portal. I'll be honest, we've had some issues deploying that, but we're still working through that right now. But this way we can check all that stuff in addition to the wired LAN for the district, and it creates a great baseline across the board. And let me see if there's anything else. Kind of came down to we were kind of faced with the fact that wireless was increasing in importance, and it was a matter of getting more staff or more tools that could benefit the team and the district. And we opted for tools because they don't sleep, they don't take vacation, they're available all the time, and they can constantly collect that data for us to create that baseline. And it has been a tremendous help to us in terms of our ability to kind of identify root cause. And we're looking forward to expanding the solution further to all of our locations long term. You can see on here we also got GPS data from all the LTE connections once this loads. And we're also looking at adding some of the additional tests. Bonnie mentioned iPerf. We are setting up some servers so that so these sensors will do iPerf testing to those sensors centrally, so we can get kind of bandwidth management and monitoring. We're also looking at integrating ServiceNow as well. So long term, this might, once we get a better handle on some of these minor issues that are cropping up as a result of this additional visibility, we're going to very likely start integrating this, so start generating tickets for things as well, or at the very least, we might generate tickets for the sake of creating we're working on a dashboard in ServiceNow that would be kind of a central status page for the district for non-technical users, so people that aren't in our field techs or help desk groups. And with that, that's really all I've got to show. I think I'm going to pass over to Mark to see how he's using it. Thanks.
All right, I'm going to see if I can do the screen share here. I didn't test this ahead of time, so we'll see if I get the right one. No.
It's the little arrow next to the microphone at the bottom of the screen.
Yeah, I just wanted to see if I could get just the right swing up. I'll just cancel it. Okay, so most of what I have is pretty similar to what Devin had talked about already. Arlington's a little bit smaller. We're about 50 miles north of Seattle, about 5,400 students with like one high school, an alternative high school, 2 middle schools, and 4 elementaries. And so we originally got these centers as part of a COVID grant from Aruba for some outdoor antennas to try to kind of increase access to students. And they came, I think, September, October, something like that. Honestly, like a lot of you, we were so busy putting out hotspots and trying to get Chromebooks set up and troubleshooting all the day-to-day things that I don't think we got them out of the box and started doing anything until about January. And so then we started playing with them, getting them set up, and kind of seeing what was happening. By that time, like our idea of having drive-in school had kind of gone by the wayside, and using the outdoor antennas, the focus kind of shift. But these guys have talked about the other kinds of things that we thought these would be valuable for. The biggest thing is just like they're saying, you guys are sitting in there and people are calling from the buildings and saying, why is the Wi-Fi so slow today? Why does it slow down every day when we have lunch? Is it other kids getting on the network? What's happening exactly? And it was really hard for us to determine what was going on and be able to pin that down. So hoping that this would be a really good solution for that. We have 2 sensors right now. We have one that's at the district office and one that's up at the high school. And so I can talk about a couple use cases that we've had for them in the last, I would say, 4 months that we've had them up and running. And the first one was after we got it up about the next month, we started having all of these latency issues with people getting on the Wi-Fi. And they would seem to come on and they would seem to connect, and then they would seem to drop off, and then they would seem to come on and connect back again. We use a Radius to authenticate our clients on the staff network. And so it's always been kind of a voodoo thing of like, is this the Radius server? Is this the DHCP server? Where is this happening? What's going on exactly? And so, we had those services up and running on the sensors, and had it running up in the tech office. And so all the techs would come in and you would see all the colors changing all the time throughout the day, going from red to orange to green, right? And so at one point, one of the guys made a little green cutout happy face and glued it and stuck it up with tape over the top of one of them so we wouldn't have to see the red one all the time. But it was really great feedback to kind of see what was going on. Pat Newton, one of the Aruba engineers, we called him in, and he got on a session with me and kind of walked through all the stuff you could do with this thing. And it was really, really helpful to kind of see the extent that you could really drill down on something and try to figure out where that problem was, because we really didn't know whether it was one of those other servers or was it actually the Aruba system. And it ended up being that it was a faulty DHCP server. And as we started to do some kind of testing with that on smaller segments of the network, then we basically got that worked out over time. But just like Devin was showing earlier, you'll see this thing come up and down on DHCP, on DNS throughout the day, just in terms of it not hitting those thresholds. The other thing that was really helpful was, like a lot of you, streaming high school sports became a thing this year. And so as they started to bring back high school sports, they asked if they could have better coverage in the stadium for them to be able to live stream the events to YouTube. And so we took some of the outdoor antennas that we had gotten as part of the grant, and we installed them in like 3 places in the high school up in the stadium. And, you know, my network engineer went around with a laptop with one of the techs and ran speed tests all over the places, and it all looked really good. And then the athletic director calls the next day and says, hey, it's not working. You know, it's slow. I can't get connected from here. You know, all sorts of things like that. So the nice thing with the portability of these devices is that we took the one device and moved it to the stadium, and we were able to grab some data there and kind of find out where the weak spots were. And one of the things that we found was one of the antennas was up in the press booth, which is all encased in metal, you know, like a big Faraday cage. And so he was expecting to get a signal up there, and, you know, it wasn't happening. So we've kind of rectified that. But so really helpful to be able to do that. I would say, kind of like Devin, our plan is to expand this and put one in every building, to be able to get better insight into what's going on, to be able to get better alerts when something's happening, and just nice that it's really easy to use, that it's very configurable. Our dashboard looks a lot like his, where we monitor our Google districts. So we've got it monitoring all the Google services. We've got it monitoring our external sites that we get to, and a number of internal stuff. So I kind of thought of it as kind of like my Apple Watch for the network, right? It's telling me, did I do my exercises today? Did I get my steps? Well, this is kind of telling me, you know, are things going on right? And great little tool. So that's about what I have. I can pass it back to Bonnie, or see if we have some Q&A.
Okay, well, let me go ahead and address a couple of things here. We've had some Q&A, and I see that Bonnie has been addressing those questions, but we just received one from David that says, how difficult is it to get you to connect up the 802.1x SSID? Guys?
Sure. Yeah, you want me to share my screen and show you how we would do that? Let me, if you guys can see my screen, you just go to the settings, and then when you're setting up the various networks, this is where you would add a wireless network. Just pull down on an SSID, give it an alias. Maybe this is UXI that requires authentication. And then here's the various levels that we have. So you would just add the certificate as needed. And we support SCEP as well. We also support SSO, somewhat related to this topic sometimes. You can, when you're setting up this SSID, you can also lock it in. Maybe I want to have UXI Corp just testing 2.4. And then maybe I want to have a separate test where it's just testing 5. You know, sometimes you have devices that are just 2.4 related. So you can do different things like that in the from the setup perspective. But that's where you would add it. You just add your certificate as needed in here and just upload the file. Were there any other questions? If not, I did want to talk a little bit to why these buttons are blue.
Go ahead and talk about that right now while we're having people type in some things. Okay,
sure. I didn't touch on the machine learning aspect, or I hate to use those words, but I don't have a better one to use. If you noticed, this is blue here on these buttons here. What we've implemented about a month ago was we've built in some learning in the dashboard. So if you have 20 sensors or more on your account, the dashboard will take your data to simplify the conversation, for 30 days, and we'll say, this is your DHCP response time. You know, it's dynamically setting the threshold for you. whether that's good or bad is not really the point, because there's a lot of times, especially with COVID situations, where you're having a DHCP or a DNS issue at some location, but you can't physically go and fix it, or you can't get on site, or you can't take care of it, or when you're going to take care of it, it's at a later date. You don't want the dashboard constantly turning red because of an issue that you know about, or you don't care about, or just can't be addressed right now. Maybe it's a power outage. So we've gone to where I look at your data. I look at your data for 30 days, and I normalize that, and I continue to alert by giving you just the information here. I don't turn your dashboard. Everyone hear me okay? Yeah. I don't turn the dashboard red unless the thresholds go above and beyond that. So that's what this blue is. And I don't have any red alerts to show you what that looks like, but you would be able to see it. I don't know if I can mute somebody, but if something goes red, then you'll see just that one alert. And the incident would be marked up here as an incident, and it would say, I've had incident happening on X amount of sensors for.
Hey, Mark, I think you're unmuted.
Yes, I was. Sorry about that, everybody. Doing a little tech support on the side here.
So this is an example of an incident, and it would, your email alert or your, Slack or notification, whatever it is, would say 13 sensors have been affected by this HTTP timeout on this service starting at this time. And then you could go to the map, and it would, let you drill into where exactly these sensors are that are having this issue, and you could directly route to those sensors, to get the specifics. You would also then receive one notification when it was resolved, and it may say, maybe it started with 12 sensors, and maybe the resolved notification is going to say 25 sensors have been impacted by the specific service HTTP timeout, and this is the duration that it took. So I just wanted to touch on that because it's something somewhat new we've released. And it's you just set it up on the settings here in the AI ops section where you would turn on incident detection. We also have central integration. So if anybody's using central, you can, you've got a single pane where you could see the sensors and the status of the sensor, whether it's good or bad, and then click through and go on to that particular sensor from the central dashboard. And that's nice because then you've got a full flow of the data. I'm able to see what was happening on the inside of the network as compared to what was happening on the edge of the network at the same time, and start to correlate that. And I'm sure as the products continue their integration, at some point we'll be bubbling up the remediations. Based on what inside behaviors and external behaviors we remediate, we suggest you do X. So I just wanted to add that little tidbit in. Sorry, kind of went off on a little thing there.
So Bonnie, there's two questions inside the Q&A here. One is, they're both from the same individual, Jay. Jay says, perhaps I missed it, but what is the initial setup of a sensor? And then to follow up on that, how can the sensor assist in identifying an issue? Let's say on the wireless network.
The way you set them up is pretty easy. You receive it. You can, if you want, if you don't have a PoE port you want to put them in, you could simply plug it into the wall. There's cellular built into it, and it's managed by Twilio, so that manages the carrier and makes sure you've got the coverage that's needed. It calls home, gets the configuration, and it onboards whatever network you've said to onboard. And you can see here's a bunch of the sensors. This particular one right here is testing those two wireless networks and one Ethernet network. So after you've given the sensor, told the sensor what network to test, you can put them in groups if you wanted to. And then you just add the test to it. If that might have been done as a whole, depending on how many sensors at one time you were adding, but you just give it a test, and then it will onboard the dashboard, and you'll start to see it populate here. Here we've got this particular group has one sensor on it. And if this is the network it's onboarding, this is the test it's running in this particular group. So it's very simple to get the sensor up and going, unless I'm answering that incorrectly. And then the next sensor was, how does it show? How does the testing happen? Think of this sensor as another person on the network. I'm sitting there all day long, just continually in the student lounge. We've got this sensor logging into this wireless, one of these networks. And this, I don't know, if I filter, I can look and see what my CTO office is doing, for example. Oh, I was on that one. So I'm logging into whatever network I've configured. It could be 4 networks total. One wireless and 3 Ethernet if I want, whatever combination I want. This is the DORA process, and I'm tracking, the sensor's tracking each step along the way. If the threshold that you deemed relevant is missed or is exceeded, it will go back and retest that. And you'll see this in the triage. You'll see each step of the testing along the way. And then I'm logging into whatever applications I've said to test all day long, one after another. When I'm done, I release my IP address. I go back and I get on the next network.
Can you drill into like the Wi-Fi as an example and show them some of the metrics?
Sure.
Just about the Wi-Fi, how you identify an issue. Once you click on there, it breaks it out, and you can see various metrics about the Wi-Fi. And this is, when you're looking at it from this view, it's across the board. And then you can kind of see it per sensor as well, or per SSID in this case.
Right. And this, I don't know if there we go. So here is 26 sensors that are testing the Wi-Fi networks. And I can see here what the signal strength was. And you see as I scroll, it's time stamping anything that was happening at that particular time. And this gives me a nice comparison. If one of these SSIDs is going crazy, I would see it here, and it starts to build the story of, is this an infrastructure issue I'm running into, or is it an authentication issue, or is it a client issue? Where do I troubleshoot? If I don't have that visibility of what's going bad, I don't know necessarily where to start. If I look at just some comparisons here.
For example, we've been able to see, we've seen, packet losses occurring, high packet losses increasing, and then you go and you can drill in, and you can say, okay, well, there's an increase in channel utilization, and then the retries have increased dramatically as well. Mm-hmm. So there's some sort of RF event occurring.
Right. And you can see, high channel utilization, and this is what it was happening on. And get a snapshot of that. And that allows you to just narrow down and drill down into that particular event. So that's looking at it from the service. You can also look at it from the, I meant to go back, not to zoomed out here. If I look at it from one of these applications, I can do that same drilling into external, I guess I'm on a filter. On the filter? No. Let me get to something that's testing something. This one doesn't have any internal tests. This one doesn't have any. I'm clicking on networks that don't have any tests configured. Here's one. So, now I'm looking at just that particular location and that particular SSID and what's been happening. And you can see here that, frame retries are kind of all over the place. So, for example, if I clicked here let's go to where one's highlighted. If I clicked right here where this RSSI drop is and locked in, I can see up and down what else was happening in the network at that same time. So it starts to build the story. These are all of the other SSIDs that I'm seeing as a client. And if I maybe wanted to get to the one that I'm actually testing, where is it? I'm not seeing that because it's way down here. There we are. I can actually lock in and just test that BSSID if I wanted to do some further testing and act more like an analyzer instead of acting like a client. The first job of the sensor is to be a client. Tell me what's happening. Tell me what's not happening. Tell me how it is. Am I having a good day or a bad day? Secondarily, as I need those more details to do some troubleshooting, I could lock that client into just log on to one BSSID and one network and just keep on testing that one particular network to get to more details, and then get to the the triage of something and see where it's breaking down.
Hey, Bonnie, how many APs can a
It's up to you. You can do, some people start by just putting them in the trouble areas where things are bad or where high level folks are that nobody wants to go in and try to troubleshoot things or get ahead of the problems. Other people just go one per site. I'm going to start there and fan out. And then there's the people that do like the math project where they go, I'm just going to put one sensor for every 8 to 10 access points or something to that point. It just depends on what you're trying to accomplish. If I have a bunch of people gathering in a cafeteria and it's always a problem, like you talked about the esports, I'm going to put a sensor where all those people are gathering, and I'm going to configure some throughput tests and make sure I'm testing latency and make sure I'm testing everything related to that particular activity that has the potential to cause a problem. And so it's a mixture, but it's definitely not a 1-to-1 ratio, not even in hospitals. They don't even have to go that deep. So. Any other questions? Any other topics? Anything I missed, guys?
I'm not seeing any questions or chats right now. People can start to drop in a little bit. Maybe their question there, but can you tell me, how is this a unique product just to running
Aruba?
over Aruba, or will it work with any other vendors? Give us a little bit more information there.
Yeah, because this is a client, and any Aruba reps on the line will hate to hear this, but it doesn't matter what network I'm on. We are completely agnostic. So agnostic that half the time when I'm doing demos for people, I forget to ask what kind of network they're running, because I'm a client at the edge of the network, showing up at the front door and starting to test your network just like you would with an IT guy that took a laptop out and started doing testing. The niceties, if it is Aruba, you can get the benefits of the central integration component of it. But other than that, most of our customers are a mixture of networks, which is also, if you're moving from one infrastructure to another, this gives you some nice abilities to measure, what am I seeing? Or if you're in a really dense area where, I may have one vendor, but I've got so many other vendors at other companies, I want to be able to see what's overlapping and, what's potentially causing problems. So, yeah, we really don't care because I'm a client.
Devin and Mark, the two of you are in school districts and you're using it in different capacities, different sizes, and I think looking at some of the same things, but often different things. Are you doing any type of collaboration together and can you share your configurations in any way?
I was not aware that anyone else in the state was using these sensors at the time. So I'm happy to collaborate with others. I'm happy to share what my team has learned from our deployment, and I'd love to hear and cross-reference notes with others as well if they have any experience with them too, including Mark, of course.
Yeah, I'm not aware of other people that have them. I kind of got the feeling that it was a newly acquired product even though I think it's been around for a while. And so I would love to be able to compare and learn some things from other people. I've already learned some things just watching today.
I can add to that. We actually have quite a few schools using these. And something we've done and something we're actually adding to, and esports will be the next one you'll see. But in Australia, the school districts over there were just going to online testing. And part of the mandate was from the government was that you needed to prove to us that your network was capable of running the online testing. So they literally had somebody going from site to site to site doing all these tests. There was a certain metrics that they had to meet to, and then they were doing that. We came along and said, hey, how about we just do this with a sensor? So their program is called NAPLAN, and this is just an example. And all of this data is available at help.networks or help.capenetworks.com. But we've set up in here an article as to how to set up your external test and the various pieces to accomplish being able to give yourself a report, because we give them a weekly report that any of you can trigger that says, yes, I'm meeting the metrics that you need, so keep my funding going and that kind of stuff. So you'll be seeing more of these little help documents in here. You can get to them all up through here. And there's probably some K-12, like captive portal. You said you were having an issue with the captive portal. Well, here's how I load a captive portal and set it up. Or here's how I run a Selenium test and set it up. So.
Okay, we have another question in here from Tom Howley. Is there a subscription fee or any other one, or only a one-time purchase?
You purchase a sensor and then a 1, 3, or 5 year subscription that goes with it.
Okay. Another one from Jay. So would you need multiple sensors to monitor all interesting broadcasting SSID?
Each sensor can test 4 SSIDs, and that's a software limitation that we put in place. So it depends on how many SSIDs you want to test, and it also physically depends on how many locations you have. So, because if you think about it, if this sensor is logging into this one of the wireless networks, and if there's issues along the way, I'm going to retest on this network or on that particular test before I release that IP and get back to the next network. So what was happening is people were adding, like, they'd have a sensor test 10 networks, but the baseline timestamps were so far in between that it didn't make any sense, and it lessened the value. So, so I guess the answer is it depends on how many networks you want to test.
Certainly. I see that John Cook added in here that the Aruba booth, they're going to be talking about the UXI after the session. So if you want to jump onto there for a little bit more detail, spend some time digging in a little bit more, getting into some technical, you can do that. And Steve is mentioning the support chat is second to none and one of his favorite features for the UXI solution. So that speaks highly for their ability to respond quickly and get things to the users. So looks like we're kind of wrapping up some of these questions. Devin's been fielding the questions in the Q&A, so thank you, Devin, for that. And I saw, Bonnie, you were doing that earlier as well. What other questions might the users have? And if you want, I can look and see if you raise your hand. I can probably bring you up to the stage and you can ask a question. We have some shy people here today. You're in a technical session. That doesn't surprise me that the people are a little bit more shy. So, okay, well, unless you have additional information to share, we could wrap this one up a little bit early and give these people an opportunity to go and spend some time at the Aruba booth and get some more detailed technical content inside there.
Yeah, nope, I'm good. If
Oh, we
anybody
got
needs,
one. We got one. David wants me to hand him the mic. So, David, I'm going to hand you the mic.
Hi, I just had a question about how chatty are these on the network when they're sending their data back?
it's synthetic transactions. So, and you're just the notifications that are going back. Unless there's an event, then it's a packet capture being sent up. But I don't know, Devin, and you guys, Mark, have you seen any kind of impact?
I'm sorry, I missed the question. Can you repeat?
I'll let him re-ask.
I was just asking how chatty these are in sending the data.
I mean, in terms of what they're reporting back to the actual SaaS, the cloud environment, it's all really small amounts of traffic. I mean, it's tiny in comparison. Even the PCAPs they keep pretty small as well because they remove a lot of the superfluous additional data payload. So there hasn't been any noticeable impact at all. Now we aren't, as someone points out, we aren't using iPerf currently for any kind of testing. So you might see, depending on if you don't configure that appropriately, you might see an impact there from clients. But in terms of the reporting of data back from all of our sensors, it's negligible.
Right, and we do put in time stamps for the iPerf and for actually like Netflix, for example. If it's Netflix right here, fast.com, I wouldn't suggest running all the time because it's an application that will take as much as you give it, right? So, it kind of depends on what you're running, but I have 5 sensors here in my house, on my home network, and I'm doing fine. I haven't had any impact.
I mean, if you think about what it's doing, I mean, it's all synthetic tests, right? So, and in addition to making synthetic tests, it's less than a normal client. It's going to be like a user, but significantly less in terms of traffic.
Cool.
So Bonnie, there was one question about where the historical data is stored.
The back end is on AWS, and there's Vault that stores the certificates. There's a whole back end, that's a whole hour-long conversation from a security perspective in and of itself. So, but the primary is AWS.
Okay, another question for you, Bonnie. If you were testing via iPerf, the bandwidth consumed is real?
The
Not
bandwidth
sure.
consumed is real.
If you were testing via iPerf, is the bandwidth consumed, or maybe
I'm running a throughput test to that, and
Yeah.
maybe I don't understand the question.
Yes, of course it is.
Travis,
Yes.
can you add a little clarity to that, please? Maybe I can invite you up, Travis. You like that?
Yeah, he just.
Oh, it's more of a comment on the footprint of the sensor.
Yeah, it is a true statement that if you're using iPerf is actually going to consume whatever bandwidth you configure to consume or attempt to.
Got it.
Right. And you could do the multiple streams of testing if needed.
Well, very good. This has been an excellent session in terms of network. I'm going to call it resiliency because what we're trying to do is we're trying to look at what is on the network and see what's happening, which keeps our network up and keeps it running optimally. So, Devin and Mark, thank you from the school district perspective. It's always great to have you give us guidance and feedback that's coming in that way. And then, Bonnie, you provided some technical guidance. I greatly appreciate that because the insight is what we're looking for.
Cool.
So, and Devin says network assurance. Yes, that's what we call it. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and end the session and allow people to go consume some time with John and crew over at the Aruba booth, and we'll go from there. So have a great day, everybody. We got more sessions coming up shortly.
Thank you.
Thanks,
All
everyone.
right. Thank you.